This is the only guest speaker of the year for the St. Innocent Mission Society. This came about because we were discussing the question of what is mission and how does one look at mission in a more local context as well as the overseas context. It's always a huge question that everybody kind of asks. So that naturally led me to Kenny, who I've known for quite some time. He is the executive director of Focus North America, the Fellowship of Orthodox Christians United to Serve. So he also is a formerly was working with the OCMC, and therefore has a very interesting perspective on both the American and international sides of the church. So, thank you.
Christ is risen.
He is risen.
It's a blessing to be with all of you. Father, in this setting with so many of you, should someone open up with prayer? We'll start with prayer. We'll leave that who you leave that.
All right, just one time in English is fine, I guess. Okay. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life.
Well, thank you all for coming. And yes, from across the border. I'm Kenneth Kidd, the Executive Director of Focus North America, the Fellowship of Orthodox Christians United to Serve. And I'm with you tonight. I'm not a theologian. I'm not seminary trained. I'm a social worker and a convert into the faith whose journey the Lord has just blessed with amazing people, amazing opportunities that have just truly inspired my own path in Christ and the church. And so, if you ask my godfather that I would be standing here working for a place like Focus, he'd be like, "Oh my goodness, that was such a hard catechumen." Which is something I was unwilling to wrap my mind around some things. He'd be shocked. He's still alive. He's not. He teases me, but he asked him then because we'd never be working for the church again. But it's a blessing. I'm going to start out. It's about an 8-minute video that is kind of an overview of Focus North America itself. And that'll lead right in. You'll see the final words of the video tie directly into the theme of the evening, which is the liturgy beyond the liturgy. So I'll start that off. I'm going to start with this video. And this is brand new. This was just released literally a few days ago. So it's not even in a solid place to get it parked yet.
Since early 2009, the Fellowship of Orthodox Christians United to Serve has been a resource for Orthodox faithful, clergy, hierarchs around the United States, providing opportunities to bring Orthodox faithful together across all jurisdictions, to serve the most vulnerable of our neighbors, as we're called to do in Matthew 25.
One thing that we've done really well is asking the community what is needed. Both the community that we serve in the city, but also the community that we serve at the parish level.
It really comes down to if we can identify the need, we develop a plan, and we get the resources to fund that plan, then we invite those of us to come and serve.
I almost feel that I have this mandate to provide an opportunity to the Orthodox community here in the Twin Cities to serve to fulfill the gospel teachings of Christ.
Well, we don't have until Focus something that could really, forgive the word, focus our energies on working to alleviate the needs of those practice of showing love to our neighbor.
Anyone who knows the work of Focus knows that it's, again, providing the venue in which Orthodox Christians and their friends can be of service to the world around us. I'm very delighted that prominent ministries of Focus are located within the Diocese of the Midwest, of which I'm the Archbishop.
Focus is able to bring to a local parish a little bit of guidance and some leadership instruction to help those that feel this yearning in their heart to serve, but don't quite know where to start. And often that starts through programs like our national programs, our Back to School Backpacks, or our St. Nicholas Acts, or through the YES program.
The beauty of Yes, Youth Equipped to Serve is that we're cultivating communities to be the Fellowship of Orthodox Christians United to Serve. We want what we do to not be just a visit to a city, but we want it to start a cultivation of something greater, a consistent community.
When they go into a community, they bring young people together and really help instill the fullness of our Orthodox faith.
But through the trip experience, we're cultivating our hearts and our minds to go out and meet actual needs that are there, to discover, to listen to people, to understand, so that we can approach people and meet the needs that they have. But I think, and yes, what we want more than anything is for people to not be afraid of what's unfamiliar to them.
I am Christ for them, and they are Christ for me. And that revolutionizes the way that you live. It's a new kind of joy.
When you look at the word focus in our title, Focus North America, you can look at that actually in two different ways. At that acronym, you can see it as the Fellowship of Orthodox Christians United to Serve. And this is truly at the heart of what we do, is bringing Orthodox faithful together to meet those needs. But in the end, the reason we're coming together, the reason we're uniting to serve, is our inspiration from Matthew 25. It is to see Christ in each of our neighbors, to see the hungry, to see the sick, to see the naked, to see those who are in prison. So you can look at that focus acronym as food, occupation, clothing, understanding, and shelter.
So food is a big one for us, and I think probably for most of the centers. It's a beautiful way to interact with people. It's kind of a great level where
they get a chance to sit down with somebody who takes a genuine interest in them, to talk to them about their life, to see what needs they have. And so we try as best we can to be a good neighbor to them.
It's about hospitality. It's about relationships. And a lot of times I don't look at it as a job. I look at it as it's a blessing, actually.
When we were doing the feeding ministry outside of Greenfield Union, I saw that there was the Oasis of Hope Christian Church that was doing a similar meal distribution. And so I walked over there and we started this relationship.
When we began to collaborate with Focus Detroit, we were able to increase the number of meals we served, and we just all kind of came together. We're like a family.
I've been blessed, really a long way with the people at St. Herman's helping me out, believing in me, and something I was able to go out, right? Nothing else could.
It provides me, I think, with joyness and help. Last time they gave me like purse, vacuum, and today it's a heater. It is like a bucket. We love being and people heat up. Yeah, like they did.
I'm ready to school. We have to be thankful for the things that are offered to us and not take advantage of it. And also give back.
The unique piece of that acronym, and that's the understanding piece, that Orthodox ethos that Orthodox faithful bring into their service. Seeing Christ in the neighbor, providing that understanding and realizing that the person we're sitting in front of is created in God's image.
the most important thing about our work here isn't what we do, but how we do it. We try to offer our assistance with love, with understanding, and above all, a sense of respect.
I mean, you have to love people, and I say that every time anybody asks me. I mean, that's the most important thing.
We should be engaging the world around us. To be a Christian means to be church, but to be church in the world.
We don't see any boundaries. We don't see that there are walls in the church.
That we're carrying the Eucharist and the liturgy and really letting our light shine to all of the world.
So that when we leave the liturgy, my image is we come to a place like Focus, and you need to do something with everything that you're holding in your arms. Just imagine the power of distributing love, acceptance, forgiveness, mercy, respect to those that we serve here at Focus.
My name is Father Paul.
Roy Man Community.
Father Malcolm.
Carmen Jones.
My name is Dylan Patterson.
My name is Carl Cook.
Magdalena Diaz.
First name James, last name is Brown.
Archbishop Daniel. Sean Klein.
Father Sotirios Vitalatos. Urban Boy.
I'm Ellie Fall.
My name is Vera Crawford.
Joyce Cubinides.
My name is Katrina Vitar.
Lee Fukori.
This, the liturgy outside the doors of the church, that the work continues, the love grows as we build the kingdom in our backyards. That's why Focus exists. We're there to serve the most vulnerable of those neighbors in our communities through this love, these opportunities that Christ has given us.
So that is kind of the broad overview of who Focus is and who we are and bringing the Orthodox faithful together. So good to see you guys. I was very I'm able to say club now. I look forward to catching up with you. Oh, nice. My CMC days. My CMC days. But so much of what was reflected, and probably the biggest thing in my own journey to Orthodoxy, was kind of reflected in kind of that foundation of what Focus is. And it's, in my own, I was charismated in a small Antiochian parish in Huntington, West Virginia, is where I came into the faith. And one of my very first times sitting with Father Daniel, who brought me in, we talked about, there's a couple things that we believe as faithful is that each and every individual is created in God's image. He talked about imagining throughout your community, you could actually see that icon on the chest of each and every person that you encountered. How different would our communities actually be if you could see that icon? When you're at the gas station, when you're in line at the grocery store, probably when you're driving down 95 and that car kind of swoops in front of you across all the lanes. If you can see that icon, on the bumper of their car, how different would it impact the way that we work with each other? And also in the parish I was cremated, right above the altar was the icon of the Theotokos, more spacious than the skies. With their arms outreached, Christ here, and just the sense of the Theotokos is the icon of the church. And her being the first to welcome Christ into her heart, and inviting all of us as a church to say yes to Christ today. And that saying yes to Christ, in the pew next to us, at the gas station, on the street corner. And that very much just blew open. As growing up, my relationship with Christ was very one-dimensional. As long as I was living with Christ, that's what was important. I had no sense of the body of Christ, everyone's role in the body of Christ. That was so brand new. It blew open my heart and my mind. And all of that foundation is what really drives us going out and saying yes to Christ in the world. And spending the time, meeting the people, talking to them, That was a huge part of my own journey and kind of what started me on this path. So I'm very thankful to God each and every day for that path that I've been blessed to start moving down. So we talked about the focus acronym. In the video I talked about it's a fellowship of Orthodox Christians united to serve, but you can also look at that as food, occupation, clothing, understanding, and shelter. And what we try to relay is that really what makes Focus unique. If you look at the array of nonprofits in any of your home communities, what really sets Focus apart is that that understanding piece. And it's that reality that we are looking at Christ when we look at each and every one of our neighbors. And so we see that we're both growing and benefiting. I stole this from Katrina Vitar as part of our Youth Equipped to Serve kind of curriculum. But we often talk about fixing, helping, and serving. And when we're out there working in the community, are we sent to fix? Are we sent to help? Are we sent to serve? And we we could have a 3-hour discussion for some time. And I'm sure maybe this evening when we're sitting out there with the wine and cheese, we could have a 3-hour discussion about it. But looking at the words fix and help, in essence, kind of suggests an unbalance. That somehow we are somewhere that we want to help you get to, versus serve, where we're recognizing the mutuality of how we're serving each other and the mutual benefit that we get. When we're just meeting, we're spending time with them, we're seeing Christ, we're seeing what their needs are, we're realizing today you need some food. Today you need some help with your job resume. And we'll tackle these other things later. But together, I'm going to start this journey with you. Where that sense of service comes out most readily is when you walk into our focus centers and you walk into a meal. And probably if any of you have ever served at a homeless shelter or some sort of community kitchen, you're probably used to walking in and there's a long table and volunteers kind of stand behind the table and then you serve the soup or you serve the sandwiches or you serve the pasta over top of the counter. And then your guests, they go out and sit in the dining room and the volunteers all go back into the kitchen. And that's probably the image that many of you have. At a focus ministry, it's all family style. Guests come in, they sit at tables much like you would find here, the dining hall here at the seminary. But then our volunteers would serve the meals to everybody, but then they would come and sit with the guests as well. And everyone has a community meal together. And over the course of that community meal, our volunteers are kind of prepped and trained to ask questions of the guests. And then afterwards, like for example, in St. Louis, Father Matthew McDonald is our director in St. Louis. He would kind of talk to all the volunteers later in that evening. And they'd be like, one of the volunteers would say, well, tonight I met Patty. Patty was sitting at my table. She's a single mom. She's struggling with her bills. She had her meal, but then she wound up taking a couple extra plates back home because she does have housing, but she is living, she's caring for her elderly mother, and she has one daughter. But these are some things I learned she's struggling with. Then Father Matthew knows to circle back around, touch base with her, see what other things we can connect her with. But our volunteers sat, had dinner with her, connected, and that's happening all across the Focus universe. Orthodox faithful each and every night are doing that in communities across the United States. It's absolutely beautiful to see that unfold. So as so many of you are looking at your own future ministries, your own future roles in the parishes, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And so you're familiar with Focus, and I hope that you will see Focus as an integral part of future parish life, where each and every one of you land. But I want to talk a little bit, switch the discussion a little bit. This is what will really get the discussion going, as I want to talk about some of the opportunities when it comes to outreach and service in our communities, as well as some of the barriers. So first, I want to talk about just some of the opportunities that I've seen, what I've witnessed, and some inspiring clergy that I've worked with. So probably the priest that was the founder, not necessarily the founder, but the inspiration for all the work of Focus around the country. And that was in Kansas City, Missouri. Father Paisius Altschul, now is Father Alexei. He was the priest of St. Mary of Egypt. Bishop's Parish in corner of 31st and Troost in Kansas City, which my understanding of what that corner looked like 30, 40 years ago. Some local people say the safest thing to pass through that intersection anytime after dark, the only thing safe would be a bullet. But that was that intersection. But that's where Father Paisius established his mission parish. And he knew every household, every individual, every single mother, every shut-in, every ailment, every family dealing with trauma within a 5 to 10 block radius of in any direction from that church. He would just walk, cassocked, walk around the neighborhood, and just spend time talking, asking questions, listening to the family stories, and got to know them and said, well, we have some food here at the church, at 31st Church. Come on by, stop in there, and we'll hook you up with some milk and some bread and some eggs, and we can talk a little bit more. The same thing, there was an inspiring priest, OCA Parish, South Philly. Completely just escaped my mind what the name of the parish is.
Holy Assumption.
Assumption. It's kind of a couple blocks off Passyunk and on the south side. Now, a few years ago, when I visited, it was Father Matthew was the priest there. And Father Matthew, same thing. We talked for a few minutes in the parish, and he said, let's go walk. And we just went walking. And again, he knew every individual on every corner, in every house that was within a certain radius. And he said that his parish building was probably the safest building in the neighborhood. Because if any young person tried to mess or graffiti or do anything on that building, their grandma was going to hear about it and know what happened. And they're like, oh, you messed with Father Matt's church. He's really out there getting to know us. And it's not assuming anything going out in the community, it's just being and making that commitment to go beyond the parking lot, to go out to the neighborhood, to meet those. But it doesn't necessarily, the other opportunities aren't just beyond the parking lot. I was at a parish in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, a number of weeks ago. And there, it was a Vesper service, and then I was speaking to the parish afterward. And while I'm sitting there, there was a young family about 2 pews behind me. And it was a family. It was a father, a mother, probably 4 kids. But one of them, just visual, I don't know the details for sure, was severely autistic and struggling. And the mother was struggling during the entire Vesper service. You can tell. And so, in that talk after, when we talked about the opportunities to reach out and serve, they came up and said, well, there's that family that was sitting right behind me. Is the parish ready to embrace that family and help that mother? What could the parish do to serve that family? And it happens that family they were brand new to the parish, had only been there for 2 weeks. So no one really got a chance to get to know them yet. But they kind of ran with that, and how can we embrace that family? Who are the neighbors that are just close by to your parish? Some are harder than most, but if your parish is in a neighborhood, Holy Trinity, Danbury, Connecticut is a little bit harder. You kind of step on a hill by yourself. But other parishes that might be in a neighborhood, even if you're in a suburban area, there's a grade school that serves your area around your parish. Are you getting a chance to get to know that grade school? What are the families and the children that are in your local grade school dealing with? What are their struggles? What's the percentage of the kids in that school might be on a free or reduced lunch program? What are they struggling with? And this is whatever the grade school, junior high is, right there in the district where your church sits. Even if that's sitting on a highway. What's happening right around you in that community? Have you taken the time to even walk through that neighborhood? Take some of the kids out from the parish. Are there a couple lawns that are a little bit overgrown? That's probably a sign, okay, there's probably an older person that lives here. Could they use some help with their lawn care? Their gutters are a little bit crooked. Could they use a little bit of home maintenance? And you've really not even left your neighborhood. I'm saying the opportunities are right there. You don't necessarily have to put together a big group and go down to the homeless shelter downtown, or coordinate a big group and go down to a nursing home. There's opportunities right there around your parish. Because many people might be nervous about going into downtown. going into a homeless camp and serving there. Which I'm going to cross over now into some of the barriers that I've found here in the past handful of years, especially since I've been serving in Focus. And Acts 1:8, and this comes from my years at OCMC, we always talked about Acts 1:8 usually. Be my witnesses in Judea, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the world. For years at OCMC, I was always focused on the ends of the world. And now I'm backing it up a little bit. To Jerusalem, right here in your neighborhood. Judea, tri-state area. Samaria. Who is Samaria? New Jersey. If I didn't hear that, it was New Jersey. People who are watching this later, New Jersey is Samaria. I'm from West Virginia, so Samaria is anyone that went to the University of Pittsburgh. You can't cross. If you're a WVU fan, you don't associate. If you're from Ohio, you probably don't talk to people from Michigan. Ohio, Michigan. Those type, and I make light of that. But thinking about who are those that are hard to love? Where it comes down when you think about service and seeing Christ in your neighbor, who is it harder to see that icon on their chest? Is it that person that's come out of prison and is now presenting themselves at the front door of your parish? Is it the person that traditionally is flying a sign on the corner down the road from your parish and is now hanging out in your parking lot during liturgy? Or walks in the foyer and your ushers are greeting them, but they're hanging out because they might start soliciting people during coffee hour. Is that Samaria? Is it that cousin of yours that's been divorced and remarried and divorced and remarried and divorced and remarried, or that cousin that stole your boyfriend back 35 years ago? Is that your Samaria? You just can't quite get over that hump to see that icon of Christ. And I was at a parish working with a Bible study group. And this was in suburban St. I've been talking about St. Louis a lot, I realize. I do have some other examples, but this is where this unfolded. I was with the Bible study group. And we were talking about we have an active ministry on the ground at St. Michael the Archangel Parish, which is just on the near south side of downtown St. Louis, is where the Focus Center is, and where all the outreach kind of emanates from. And I'm talking, we're having a talk, and it's got all brainstorming what some of the needs are. And one of the gentlemen around the table looks at me and says, "Are you suggesting that I bring my family down to your Focus Center and we be a part of a meal with people that live downtown?" I said, "That's one idea. That'd be great." He said, "Yeah, that's not going to happen." He said, "I'm not going to take my children into St. Louis." And he literally said, "If I take my family into St. Louis, we will die." There's just this sense of other. And in my mind, I'm thinking, so you have not been to the zoo, you have not been to a St. Louis Cardinals game, you have not been to the Arch in over 10 years? And they're like, "No, you do not go into the city, or you will get hurt." And so there's this sense of the other and this fear of the other, and you need to create those opportunities. And there's going to be people that are completely drawn. And we're like, "Yeah, I'll be in downtown St. Louis in a minute. I'm going to go down to Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles tomorrow. Let's go." And I've got food, and I've got socks, and I've got all this. But there's going to be that pushback right away that I've encountered, because people are not going to be open to serving. So it's creating and finding something to say yes to all those different levels. You're going to have people in your parish that are going to say yes right away and are ready to build that program, to kind of wrap their arms around that family with the autistic child there in the parish, or to build that food delivery ministry to the sick and shut-ins in your parish, or to do that, and they're going to go build a relationship with the school counselor at the local neighborhood school. But then it's also important to think about and say yes to coordinating something that you are going to have people that are going to go downtown and be willing to engage and encounter the people that are on the sidewalk and are coming out of the shelter and maybe suffering from abuse or recovering from an abusive relationship in one of those programs. It might be in your communities. It's building programs across all of those spectrums. Where does focus play a role in all this? Well, first, I'm just encouraging you to think about that as you're all thinking about your future ministry. Do you see your parish? I guess it was, Father, I don't remember who the quote was. Is the parish your universe, or is the universe your parish? I don't remember who said that. Someone said that. And it's always resonated in my mind about your universe being right there on the property, which, granted, I understand my limited understanding of theology, the fullness of the faith is in the smallest mission parish. But is that your universe? Or is your whole community your parish you're going to be going out into? So your people be ready to build ministry at all those different levels. But you're going to have pushback, you're going to have fear. And the word, I'm embarrassed to share some of these stories, but I was with a group one time. And this time the group was solely a group of Philoptolos ladies in a Greek Orthodox Orthodoxy parish. And we were talking about doing some work on the streets. And it was a group of women that would be working, we'd be doing some work on the street, but also there were some migrant farm camps in this region of the country that we were doing some outreach toward. And a couple of ladies just said, there is way more worthy people that we can be reaching and serving. And this is my own light to my own heart, but the word worthy, and someone starts using the word talking about people's levels of worthiness, that's what I shoot into the stratosphere. And these women were like, Kenny, we can't even relate to you here because you're talking about we have no interest in working or serving with you or doing any of this. There's much more worthy people. Can't we just go down to the grade school, and take some food and some cupcakes for Christmas? And the priest literally came behind me and bear hugged me, lifted me up, and carried me out of the room. But I realized what some of my own triggers are. That was one of them. But that's the reality in the parishes. The thought of serving some people coming out of prison. I was in a parish in Florida one time, and there was a couple of retired cops. They were retired New York City cops, had now lived in Florida, and I'm there talking about developing a program for people that were formerly in prison. These cops would have none of it. And they were saying, no, they shouldn't even gotten out. Do you think we're going to welcome them in this community now? And it came back to that worthiness conversation. So that's the reality you're going to face when you start thinking about your neighbors. And there's a lot of Seminary out there. So I was going to stop here and if anyone's willing to share, is there Samaria to you or in your community or Samaria you'd be willing to share? You can see yourself have trouble seeing that icon of Christ on their chest.
We were hoping you were going to tell us. What focus spots you got in Yonkers in the city?
So is there a sense for, I guess, I know a lot of you are coming from all over different corners of the country. From Connecticut to Cleveland to San Diego, you're coming from all over the place. So think about who could that Samaritan be? So I'll go ahead and I'll throw out a controversy. This is another 3-hour discussion, I realize. And this is probably something that's going to happen out there. Okay, you're pulling off I-95, you're pulling up at the top of the ramp of Bronx River Parkway, and there's the guy standing with the cardboard sign. What do? What happens in that moment?
All the doubt comes in.
I'm sorry?
All the little thoughts of doubt begin to stew. You have an instinct to help, and there also is this conflicting instinct to distrust. And they're always kind of at war with each other.
Thank you. You engage? Do you put on the blinders and look ahead and think, oh my gosh, come on, turn green, turn green, turn green? What happens? What do you do? Please.
Yeah, to build off you, Father John, like, I justify for myself why I shouldn't give them something. And that's a question I have, and I don't know if I have a good answer to it. Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Usually right away, someone will say, no, you don't give them anything, because they're just going to abuse it. They're going to, the snap judgment has happened. They're going to take whatever you give them, and they're going to buy drugs, they're going to buy alcohol, they're just going to use it if you give them any money. That's someone right off the bat, that's their quick rationale. You're just enabling them to do something. But do you know that? Do we have any way of actually knowing that? You have approximately 3 seconds to make a snap decision. Or a snap judgment is what you're making in 3 seconds. And should we even be making the snap judgment in 3 seconds? Should we even be entertaining a snap judgment? One thing I always do. So the least donated item, and probably the most needful thing that most homeless shelters and people who work with homeless people say, are socks. So the next time, whenever I got a few extra dollars and I'm at Walmart or Dollar General, I'll pick up a whole packet of dark colored crew socks. Usually a little bit longer, but they're darker colored, make sure they're a little bit longer. And I keep a bag of socks behind my driver's seat. And I can easily, gives me a chance, I can roll down the window and hand them a pair of socks and just say a few words with them. But now that's easy for me to say. I realize I'm a tall white male that as long as I don't open my mouth, some people think I may look intimidating. But once I open my mouth, it all goes away. But and the southern twang comes out and then it's all gone. But if I'm sitting in my car, I can look at that. I know that's easy for me to say. For me just to easily engage somebody on the sidewalk or the street, because I'm a white male that's tall. So I realize it's a little more nerve-wracking. If you're a woman by yourself and you're walking down the sidewalk, and I'm suggesting you engage someone. But even I've had women that are just thinking, they'll keep a couple pairs of rolled up socks in their purse. Is there something quick that they can offer as they're walking by? There was a Sunday school group, and this, they were having their vacation church school, and they called me, and they were helping build some curriculum. They wanted to study both missionary saints, like St. Nicholas of Japan, so international mission, St. Nino of Georgia they were studying, but they were also looking like St. John the Merciful, and just his whole philosophy of how he would serve in outreach. And as an afterthought, she goes, oh, and after we did all that all week, after the vacation church school was over, she goes, oh, and as an aside, we made a bunch of cookies, and we walked around the neighborhood, and we gave cookies to all the neighbors in a few block radius around the church. And she said that as an afterthought of what had happened for vacation church school. And I was like, but that's it, you did it. She didn't even realize what she had just told me, that the kids got out into the neighborhood and got to know all the neighbors about the church. And there was always a few people that right away said, oh, you're that big building with the dome down at the end of the block. You're from there. Okay, how are you different than my Baptist church? And the conversation was engaged. Even there, that even though it was service, but it also got to a little bit of evangelism in the end with a lot of the neighbors. And just that hour, you're like, okay, you're coming here at my doorstep, you're giving me a bunch of cookies and some bread and something. Who are you guys again? And what does Greek Orthodox mean? So there's always those tools for engagement. So other thoughts, other Samaritans, I put that one scenario at the top of the interstate ramp. Are there others? Please.
Before this, I lived in San Francisco, and it's, for one thing, the homeless issue is very, very serious there, but also, I remember even just walking to church the 10 blocks from my apartment, you probably run into at least 7 or 8 different encounters. Mm-hmm. So I found myself thinking, well, I mean, I need to have a practice, like you mentioned, like have something that sucks. But then when it's that many, it felt overwhelming. And so I always had that question, like, how do I feel guilty? I don't know.
Just even saying hello acknowledging that there's a person that just made eye contact with you will often go miles. In most scenarios. I don't want to suggest that anyone just be completely Pollyanna-ish, and just start engaging everybody. There's some level of discernment, and especially for those of you who may be here from the region and grew up around New York City and the Bronx, and there's a certain level of caution and just awareness you have to have. But at the same time, just acknowledging the other person just in case, even if you don't want to give them anything. Because the last 100 people that have walked past them have had the blinders on and completely ignored there was a person there. Just the fact that you smiled and said hi. And I had a close buddy of mine who lives in Seattle, which is not too far removed from the situation of what's happening in the city of Seattle. And he said there was just one gentleman that he walks by every day, coming and going from his parking garage to his office, that he just simply stops and smiles and says, good morning, good afternoon. And one time he actually stopped and said, what's your name? And they gave each other their names. So he had nothing to offer him, but he learned that his name was Bob. And as he's walking by, he said, Bob, good morning, take care of yourself today. And once in a while, he would bring him a sandwich, he'd bring him a cookie, he'd bring him a Coke, something random. He'd bring him a small relationship built. But he was seeing him on a regular basis. So just the acknowledgement. As long as it's done in a what would normally be seen in a regular cautionary, safe way. Again, don't be too Pollyanna just running out there. I don't want to suggest that, but at the same time, don't put on blinders and make assumptions and those snap judgments about everybody. Just that simple act of just eye contact and saying hi can go wonders, even if you have nothing to offer them, most often. Because you're probably the only person that may have spoken to them that day. That's been my experience and some of the volunteers that we worked with. Other thoughts, other questions? Yes?
So I find myself making a connection between what you have been sharing with us, especially this last incident where your analysis and response to this offer, connecting to the area of hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm thinking, just recently, a friend of mine who's actually a Hebrew scholar, a professor in theology and in that field, and she was sharing with a Caucasian lady, sharing with me this exactly about this eye contact thing. She said often she finds herself, like, I don't know, other environments or whatever, I mean, even by one encountering the church fellow, like one fellow parishioner or congregant, she finds herself trying to, avoid that.
Oh.
Or, I mean, I do have that experience, both being treated that way and treating others that way, I totally admit. So that's why I'm thinking about this area of hospitality. I wonder what you think about when we are as the body of Christ within the one parish, as supposed to, God calls us to try to live out the fullness of, the image of Christ, right? Then how we treat one another, given this example I just admitted and shared, and as versus or in relation to what you'll be sharing with us.
It's very beautiful because you just should, because we've been talking about those are neighbors in need in our community, and those that might be in the hospital or in the nursing home or living on the street. But this example was, people put on their blinders and they're like, okay, I've got my communion, I'm getting out of this church right now, I'm going to get to that parking lot before I've got to encounter anybody or I'm asked to do anything here for the parish. I've got to get out of here, I'm going to do a quick swing by, grab the donut, and get out the door and not make eye contact with anybody. So it transcends just of how we're treating each other in the body of Christ, whether it be in our parish, in our pew, family members, all the way to the street. How do we overcome that? Where we kind of silo ourselves into our interests, our need, and open up our hearts to all the different people that are around us. Christ, who are we blocking out? Even at church coffee hour, we're trying to dart out the door. What might Christ be bringing into our path that Sunday afternoon before we go to our car? And we're just trying to get out of there. We don't want to socialize. We don't want to, we don't have to worry about anybody else. So this transcends all different levels. But it takes a commitment. It takes that prayer. I don't usually talk about this, but personally, that morning prayer of Saint St. Philaret. How many greet the coming, give me in peace? I realize I have to say that every morning. That has got to be a part of my morning prayer routine, because it reminds me, and often because of the work I do, and I supervise a lot of people all over the country to focus, okay, who am I going to embitter and embarrass today? By my actions, my words. What I do? I need to be aware of the words and what comes out of my mouth. Am I going to embarrass or embitter others? Potentially. And unintentionally. And how do we talk through that prayer? I pray that my heart is open, that I don't close it out to the different people God's going to encounter with me. I don't know if I took your comments in the way you thought I might take them, so I apologize if I went a whole other direction than what you might have been thinking to bring up. But, yeah, it's a challenge. It's something to think about, of how you build community, especially those of you going into a parish here in the sooner than later future, to be thinking about that. It's a struggle. Other commentaries? We have just a couple more minutes. I'm sure Nick wants to wrap up pretty soon. Yes?
Yeah, thank you. In 2008, I come from Uganda. It's in East Africa. In 2000,
Metropolitan Jonah.
Sorry?
My time it was with Metropolitan Jonah.
Oh,
Jonah.
Yes.
I know Metropolitan Jonah.
In 2008, when I was still during my high school, that is when OCMC team came to Uganda, and I was, during my holidays, I became an interpreter, a translator, translating from English to the local language. They were providing medical supplies, medical assistance to the different churches in our community. And then one of the service provider, the one that I was serving him, the time has been so long for them to serve the community, almost for the whole day, and they were so tired. But the turnout of people continue, more people keep coming, and more keep coming. And then he asked me that, Richard, what can we do now with all these people? Then I did not have an answer for that. Instead, I also asked him, what do you feel from your heart for them? Then he asked me again and said, Richard, this is the situation in Uganda, in the northern part of the country. And I said, yes, at least you are able to witness and see it. So then we continued with our conversation, and he asked me that, do you think in future, we were talking with you, you want to become a priest? You're planning to go to the seminary and become a priest. Supposing you're put in a parish, how would you deal with all this situation, the turnout of these people? That was a very good question to me, which I did not have an answer for it. And then with my experience is that mostly in our church, people in the community, they expect you as the parish priest. They look at you as the answer to their solutions. In that situation, if I'm faced with that situation as a parish priest or a priest of that church, what can I do in that situation? This is like my question to you. That many people might be facing here after seminary, they go to the community, and the need of the community is overwhelming that sometimes the priest may become so vulnerable to solve all the problems. That is something so really demanding.
And now I'm going to speak to this not as someone who's been seminary trained. I know one of the Reverend Fathers maybe build on this, but I'm going to answer that from my personal aspect as a social worker. I want to come from that angle. And I worked at OCMC, just for a future connection here. So Father Close's parish are the doctors, and that group is responsible for all the work in Gulu in that part of Uganda. So it's that parish outside of Denver that still to this day continues to support the medical work in northern Uganda. So that's your personal connection with him for further conversation. There's a connection there. But as a social worker, to me, 75 to 80% of the time, in a scenario like that, people just want to have the opportunity to be heard. And someone's going to listen to them. Do you have all the answers to everything all the time? No. But just the fact that someone took time, was 100% present with them for just a few moments and heard what they were feeling, what they were encountering, what was weighing them down. Even though you may not have the answer, just the fact that you were present, and it's something that may not be able to work on until later, then that went a long way to kind of getting through whatever pain they might be dealing with, or the upset that they had walked. I'm sure, I remember hearing about that some of the people had walked all day to come to that medical clinic, only to find out that there were 300 people waiting, and there was no way the doctors were able to get to them. So just the pain they felt after doing it, and then that night, have to walk back to their home village. And that was my understanding of what unfolded that day. That's something I've heard a lot about, what was going on in Uganda. But just listening to them. And I don't know if fathers, is there something deeper there? If an overwhelming, it's just the listening part of what I've as a social worker does go a long way. But when you lay on a couple of spiritual levels and other things they may be dealing with in the parish life, I'm sure it's much more complex than that.
I'm not sure it is. I think the really making sure someone is heard is the spiritual level.
Okay.
I mean, they're one and the same, and it's ironic. It's the level we often neglect.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And it's them sensing that you're 100% present in the moment with them. And it's not happening during the coffee hour, where again, the parish council president's tapping you on the shoulder, someone else is tapping you over here, you gotta go, and oh, we have to go back in and do a memorial, and you're scattered. Do you stop and actually take the time to hone in and make eye contact and talk to that person, even if it's just for a couple of minutes? That, in my experience, is what can really go a long way, even though you've got 15 things pulling you in all directions. And I imagine that day-to-day life at the seminary is well for Father Chad. Just at any given moment, there's 18 messages on his desk and 15 people waiting to hear from him. But just having, literally, I thought I'm not going to be able to see him, but just I had 2 minutes with Father Chad before we started this. We were standing here, we were looking eye to eye, talking to each other. I was like, I got to spend time with Father Chad. Not many people get to say that each day. I got a couple of minutes with Father Chad. Nothing profound really happened there, but it was nice. Yes?
Maybe a short one. In 2017, Father Chad came to Uganda, and in my parish in Brazil, where I go to, he was able to have a conversation with 7 to 10 youths. And out of the 7 to 10, up to now, majority have remained in the church.
Oh.
And they're still asking, when is Father Chad coming to see us again? I told them I still have no answer for that. But with the conversation they had, most of them have developed spiritually, and they have remained in the church due to the kind words and advice he was able to share with the youth, and he gave them soccer, football, and they were so joyful for that. So is that the kind of good way of?
It can be. I mean, that's a portion of it. There's going to be that opportunity where that really goes a long way, but then there's also just people are in pain, they are suffering, and it's just taking a minute to make eye contact and acknowledge that there's a human there and listen to them for a few minutes. It's all about the listening. You may or may not have anything profound to say back. You may just be able to spend time with them and help them build a soccer ball out of palm leaves and then play soccer with them for a few minutes, but that still could go a great distance. If someone feels like they've been heard. Now, a month or two later, they make it upset. Okay, nothing's happened. Yeah, you heard me, but now what? There's always going to be that, and there may be 100 of those things, but the way you initially interact is just listening and being present with people. And that's what's happening. You saw, on the streets. That's what we're training young people to focus. So kind of in closing, I'll go ahead and kind of close it out. I'm not in any rush to get out of here tonight, so I'll be out there all evening. I just want to share, I want to introduce who Focus is, the work that we do, kind of what, I think I gave you a pretty good sense of what the foundation of what we do and how we do it. And how, in the Orthodox context, the way we serve and connect with people is a little bit different than what you might see at another nonprofit in your community. It's that impact through interaction. Impact through interaction, and actually you're looking at that person as a living icon. And realizing there's an icon, that divine spark is in each and every person. Regardless, everyone is so much bigger than whatever legal issue, housing issue, mental health crisis they're in the midst of. Everybody is so much bigger because of that divine spark that lives within each and every person. And you start there. And you start at that level and you're serving each other. And then you build, and you're just present there. Now, when all of you get out in your communities, Focus is there to be a resource to your community, to help you build ministry, to we can come in and help you train up your local lay leaders. Because we realize it's not just going to be the clergy and your Batushkas, they're going to be the one having to be in charge of everything. I know there's sometimes in that culture that you have the idea, well, no, you've got to be the one to organize it and make it happen. But if you just kind of start creating that culture where your parish is going out in the community, Focus can be a resource to come in and help you train up your lay leaders, help identify them, maybe look at the needs assessment, help connect your community with that school system, with that family center, with the VA medical center that's across town. We can help you make some of those connections and begin to build that. And ideally, what Focus would love to see is that what happens in your parish, that what might start at Holy Trinity, Danbury, Connecticut, is going to grow and be a Focus Western Connecticut, or a Focus Danbury, where it's not just Holy Trinity, but it's going to be Holy Trinity and Christ the Savior in Southbury, and 3 or 4 parishes, maybe a couple of parishes coming from Stanford, maybe include Bridgeport in that, where it becomes one Orthodox unified voice, where it's all the parishes and faithful working together. And just imagine the scale of the program, whether it be food or clothing or job training or tutoring or different things that all bring all those talents together could do to be a unified Orthodox voice in your community. But it's going to start with a spark and just getting the faithful of your community to see beyond their parking lot and to begin to see that living icon across the street from the parish and be ready to welcome those people into your community and to serve them. And then that'll grow. The Focus is here as a resource to be that pan-Orthodox voice and help you pull your communities together. We only have 5 or 6 bricks and mortar centers around the country over these past 12 years, but we're looking to grow. And we're growing our structure, we've stabilized, we're moving into our adolescent stage as a nonprofit, and we're here to serve you. So thank you guys. Yeah.
This, not to ask you to go into the wrong thing, but do you have a sort of framework that tends to work across parishes, or is it very consulting, depending on the parish and very much specific to each place?
It'll be very specific because we realize what's happening in Los Angeles is going to be very different than what's happening in Columbus, Ohio, which is very different than what's happening in San Antonio. That's very much, and also some of the different needs. That in one community, it may be very much a food ministry, clothing ministry. In Cleveland, Jared's father is our new director of our ministries in Cleveland. Literally coming on board these past couple months. And so the way we approach and engage people is it is what you would see as a traditional homeless shelter. There are 40 individuals being housed in a building run by Focus. And there is other community aspects of ministry. However, that's much different than what's happening on the streets of downtown Los Angeles, where they're just providing a resource for the community, so the needs are very different. And we're working in conjunction with Los Angeles County and building it, so it's very much individualized. It would look very different. It's nice to meet you in person this week, Jared. We're very excited that Kirk Reeves has just come on board. Kirk has been involved with our ministries in Cleveland for decades. When it was still a monastery, a house of hospitality 20, 30 years ago, Kirk's been involved. And we were very excited when Paul Finley, who some of you, if any of you ever grew up going to the Antiochian Village, you might know Paul Finley from his Antiochian Village days, then came 10 years ago, has been our director. And he's retiring. And Kirk Reeds is our new director of all of our work in Cleveland. Anything else tonight? Any other questions?
Coming back to my original, like, how do we plug in focus? What do we take back to our parish and say, okay, we got people that really want to do stuff? What do we do?
Okay. Well, what we're building right now is we've got a series. It's called kind of our local initiatives. And it's something that parish can quickly plug into. And Katrina Batar, who was in the video, she oversees our YES program, our local initiatives. So it's a year-round set of programming that it's something to get your parish thinking beyond their parish. So what's coming up immediately here in the coming month is we're starting to look toward the summer, and it's our back-to-school backpack program. Where your parish, we connect you with a local school in your neighborhood, and you commit that you're going to put together all the school supplies, all the backpacks, everything for this local school system. And we have assessed what the need of that local school is, how much could your parish actually commit, and then we'll kind of prepare you and train you up. And then there's usually there's some sort of engagement activity that would happen late in the summer to bring your parish together with those local families, to kind of get to know each other and start to build that relationship within the school. So that's what's coming up immediately in the next couple months. But Katrina and our new director of operations is Steve Christopher. So some of you might know Steve from his years of being the meeting. So Steve now works for Focus, and he is my director of operations and community engagement. So he's the one kind of leading the charge in engaging new communities. And so there's going to be there's going to be a year-round cycle of programs like this back-to-school backpack program. And they're building those as we speak to engage. So any time of the year that you can call us and say, hey, can you come spend some time with our parish? What can we plug in today in our community? Steve's going to have something and Katrina can connect you with. Right now what's happening this month is this back-to-school backpack program with local grade schools.
And I think we all need to hook with the kids. I think back to school is a key.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'm a talking for So thank you all guys for hanging in there on a Friday night. Yeah.
Will you be able to, I know you said this is mostly for domestic United States, but in future maybe will you able to organize exchange programs?
You come to Gulu?
To come to
Gulu? Come to Gulu? And just by grace of God, I know Gulu. I know Father Joseph, who has the medical clinic in Gulu. Yeah, from Tampa. It may be a little while for us to be there, but however, I am closely connected with Father Martin, and Father Chad's very connected with Father Martin and the whole group of Orthodox Christian Mission Center, where I know they're continuing to build. In fact, the Mission Center just actually took one of our amazing employees from Cleveland, and OCMC just hired them to do exactly that type of program development in a lot of countries around the world. So I'm not sure what the latest is between the Metropolitan and Uganda with OCMC, but I know that OCMC is restructuring some of their programming to where there's work on the ground to be able to create that same type of environment in countries where OCMC is preserved. I know this developing because now they have something. Because now they get Sandy Loizos is one of those amazing staff member in Cleveland, but now she's not for OCMC. We miss her, but she's been doing amazing things like what you were just describing in countries around the world.
Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Oh, Mr. Sherman, what you were thinking?
To give my own little echo in here, you triggered an awful lot of memories. You asked me at the beginning, where I served, and you didn't know the South African connection. And we think of things domestic, and we heard a little bit about Uganda, and I know the South Ray Parish has got some connection, in Western Kenya, these kinds of things. We often think about poverty as something foreign, that it's somewhere else but not here. And you've just awakened us to the fact that it's not far away. We have our own Seminaries. But I was thinking, another thing we often think about is, they want money, or they want food, or they want whatever. But I lived in South Africa in the early 1980s, in the apartheid days. And I had a link parish in addition to my primary parish, which was in an area called Winterfeld. There were probably about 60,000 people who lived there. Most of them lived in rusted out car bodies, shipping crates, shanties maybe with tin sheeting that had been used how many times in how many places. Our church was tin with a dirt floor and all the rest. Most of my white parishioners would not even think of getting in a car and going with me out there because that was a Samaria. But I always felt safe because there was such respect for clergy and also respect for the community. But I don't ever remember, I was just thinking here, being asked for food when I walked through Winterfeld or money or anything. I was always asked for blessings, prayer, holy water, because they associated me and the church with that side of things. And I think that that's a neglected side that sometimes we forget, that we do need to create safe space for people to have, you know, the smile and the greeting, but also a place to connect with their Lord, where they feel this belongs to me and this is a place that's open to me. So I know the focus is doing some different things connecting to that area as well. So we thank you for being with us. It's actually a pretty good crowd tonight. It is not only a Friday night, but there's an awful lot of other things competing. A good portion of the seminary community are in Boston with Oism and some other things. So I thank all of you as well for coming out tonight. I'm sure that the Holy Spirit is being very active in our hearts and in our minds, and you're the tool that God has used to actually awaken us to many things. And don't be surprised if 10 years from now, something that occurred this evening through your ears into your head clicks, and something else is born out of the kind of Matthew 25 ministries that you reminded us of tonight. You and I do go back a long ways. I was also trying to figure out when we first met, and that has been quite some time, actually.
I was out the first time at St. Herman Seminary was 02. 2 years ago.
Yeah, so over 20 years. And we do tend to meet at church conventions a lot.
It's true.
Yes.
I was earlier, my first time at St. Herman Seminary with Father Hector, here it was, and we were there together, and you had rooms for everybody that was coming there from OCMC, but you went out. And there stood Father Hector. He wasn't Father Hector yet, he was just Hector. And Hector and I were standing there, and he said, well, and he walked us over and showed us this closet. And there was this big closet off some room that had just enough space for Hector to put our sleeping bags. And they said, you're okay. So that was the first day I met you. And I was with your Father Hector from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Whenever I see him, I kind of look at him.
I never remember the space, yes.
There's some bowling chairs and some tables in there. Everyone else had a bed.
So there is a wine and cheese reception. Please take time to meet one another.